Hi, I'm here with Taneli Heikka, and we are going to be talking today about the process of crowdsourcing the Finnish equal marriage law, which Taneli studied, and he's going to tell us today about it. So, hi, Taneli, how are you?
I am good. How are you? Good to be with you.
No, thank you very much for accepting.
Of
I'm
course.
really glad. So, tell us what made this law so different from other laws that have been proposed in Finland before?
The interesting point was that two consecutive governments had in their program the equal marriage law, which is basically the same-sex marriage law that several countries have. Finland did not, and the governments just were unable to produce. It was too controversial. And then Finland passed the Citizen Initiative law a few years ago, which means that you can crowdsource and petition for legislation. And the equal marriage law was one of the first that really gained traction on the crowdsourcing service. And it received the 50,000 signature threshold in just basically overnight.
Wow.
And the government, as the law, the Citizens Initiative says, were obliged to take it in the parliament, and finally it was passed after a heated debate in the parliament and in the media. So it was a channel for the civil society to push for change that the government, the political system had promised but had not been able to deliver.
And how was the process of creating? How did it originate? Was it a specific group or a few groups gathered together? How was it born?
Yeah, there was a group of activists who were very dedicated in creating the draft text for the law, and that was done on several different kinds of digital and physical platforms. So they met together, obviously. They gathered ideas for the law. They drafted the text on their own crowdsourcing digital platform. And there were lawyers involved. So what came out as a draft for the petitioning was already pretty much the law. I mean, it was good quality according to legal professionals. So there was a dedicated group who did both the drafting of the text with volunteers, and then they were also very active in campaigning for the law on social media. So that was how the kind of viral process of collecting signatures took place. The link for the signaturing service, the petitioning site, was spread all over on social media, and it really caught fire. And that's how the threshold of the 50,000 names was reached really quickly.
Wow. How many people were involved in the process of creating the law or the law proposal?
If you mean by creating, the people who were
The document.
Yeah, they were probably just a handful in the end who were kind of the real kind of the hardcore of the activists. So I think they found a way to incorporate different kinds of people and different kinds of talents. So if you wanted to just be one of them who spread the link and campaign for it and put your change your Facebook profile photo to support the law, that was possible. If you wanted to contribute in the law process and in the editing and drafting the law, you could. You could also do something in between. You could go to the sites and like vote up or down different kinds of proposals.
Oh, great.
So there are different kinds of ways you can contribute. Even now, the NGO runs the Open Ministry NGO, which was behind this whole operation. In the beginning, they run a site where you can vote for different kinds of drafts. You can develop a draft. You can you can vote it up or down. As I said, you can pitch new initiatives for law, and then you can discuss them. That is not a hugely popular. What I looked just a moment ago, but it's there.
Okay.
The reason why it's not that popular, I think, nowadays, is that much of the activity has switched into the government-run petitioning site, which has the electronic signaturing system, whereas the NGO cannot afford the electronic signaturing system because the banks own it. So a lot of the kind of the very radical, in my opinion, I mean, like relatively radical at least, crowdsourcing features that were part of the activity in the end that the NGO and the civil society element of all this pushed has kind of been downscaled.
Okay.
And the more kind of rudimentary crowdsourcing element is now there to stay, it seems, which means that you can pitch an idea, you can collect the signatures, you can probably comment on it, and that's pretty much it. You probably need to form if you want to pass a law through that service, you need a core group of dedicated activists, because first of all, you need to have a good draft.
Yeah.
And the service nowadays doesn't, as far as I know, really support that kind of work. You have to go to the NGO site, which doesn't have the signaturing system, or you have to start a Google Drive or some kind of a shared digital platform to start working on it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've recently been debating myself whether internet-based technologies, crowdsourcing, open source, do have a transformative change in breaking the barrier that is between the civil and the political society. Because it seems that no matter how many citizen initiatives, internet-based there are, the last role is still in hands of decision makers. And that means that there's not a very big difference between traditional normativity making mechanisms and the ones that internet facilitates. What do you think?
That is an excellent question. Something that I've been wondering about a lot in my research. To no conclusive answer, right?
Yeah. No.
What could I say? I mean, the good thing, the really unique feature about this law was that there is a power-making channel built in the Citizens Initiative Act.
Okay.
And that is that the Parliament must deal with the initiative as if it was a parliamentarian or the government's own legislative initiative. So it needs to go to the process in the parliamentary chambers. Of course, it can be rejected, like as has happened to every other initiative so far, with the exception of this one, the equal marriage law. So there have been 13 initiatives that have been, that have made their way to the parliament.
Okay.
And it's the only one that has been passed so far. And there are 550 or so initiatives that have been collected on the site, like petitioned on the site.
With 50,000 signatures?
500 initiatives, and 13 of them have so far reached the 50,000 signature threshold, which means they will go to the parliament and enter the process. And one of them have so far been accepted. So it's not an automat, definitely, as the numbers tell. But the 13 initiatives are, most of them are pretty reasonable and good quality. So the fear there often is that if you give more power to the people, the crazies will take over, which course, can happen, but it seems that people are pretty reliable and reasonable.
Yes.
That when you give them power, they will use it with some thought.
Okay.
But what was your original? It was about how the institutional barrier between the traditional power making and the civil society
Yes.
can be broken or transgressed. My own thinking has moved towards the idea that we really need more corporeal, physical, transgressing of those boundaries, not only through internet, which should be part of it, and it's an essential part of it because it just, makes things possible.
Yes.
Like our conversation here over the Atlantic.
And in different time zones.
Exactly. And that is a great asset.
Yes.
It costs nothing. So the possibility is there, but whether that will lead into any real change or the kind of change that we wish to see, it requires that you and I meet with people who we disagree with.
Yes.
And who work on a different kind of institutional and organizational boundaries. And we leave kind of that position and question it, our own standing, and see what we can share and see what we can do. So that's where I've kind of moved from a pretty enthusiastic start with digital technology, and I still love it. But I just feel that there needs to be a transformation, not only in the communication technology, but in our own inner selves and our relationship to other people.
I agree. So, regarding the transformative role of internet-based technologies as means to do revolutionary changes in politics, when you compared online citizen initiatives with offline group manifestations like in the Arab Springs, what similarities in terms of how transformative they can be in the long term, and which difference do you find?
Between online and offline?
Yes. Group gathering, crowd mechanisms.
I mean, it wasn't the Arab Spring, actually, to a large extent, also an online experience. So that was a combination of both. And the problem of that, looking back, was that you really need power making mechanisms. It just isn't enough to form a crowd.
Yeah, I agree.
Either online or offline. If you have a crowd offline on a square, that's something that is enough to throw out a government potentially, but it's not a new government, and independent of what we think, what kind of a government the future one should be. Should it be the kind of a all-encompassing welfare state model of the Nordic countries, or should it be a more laissez-faire model or a civic republican model where the grassroots are kind of the leading power in society? Independent of that view, there needs to be some kind of a government, some kind of a legislative body that makes and enforces the rules. And that was something that just wasn't in many of the. I'm not an Arab Spring expert, but it's just looking out from the what happened, the developments, and some of the research that has been published on the communicative elements of it. It is just very much ad hoc action, but very little kind of future-oriented work.
Yes.
how are we going to operate together from now on?
The same with Occupy.
What's that?
The same with Occupy. One of the biggest critiques is that there wasn't a plan. Just manifesting against something or showing disagreement rather than proposing something structured that could replace all models.
Exactly. Well, they did try something of that sort. Again, Occupy is not my focus of this research, but they had decision-making methods in the crowd. They had their hand signals and gestures and all that to vote on things and all that.
Yes.
So there was a kind of a beginning, but in the end, a lot of that, I guess, channeled into Bernie Sanders' popularity, which then perhaps to some extent feeds in Hillary Clinton's campaign and changed the rhetoric of the campaign, I think. You can see that the ethos that was there in the Occupy movement somehow has transformed into the political parlance and the platforms that Clinton's running now. I think there's a more forceful idea of the 1%, the criticism on the 1% and how the wealth they create should be distributed more equally. That was something that wasn't in Hillary's campaign in the beginning as much as it was on Bernie Sanders. And when Bernie's campaign took fire and then Hillary eventually won, Hillary obviously adopted some of that rhetoric. So
yes, naturally.
So that's how it can channel into political power making. But then again, is that what people want truly and solely?
I don't think so.
There was so much of energy and action in the Occupy movement that people wanted to do something, but it just didn't deliver. It didn't turn into constructive action in the. And though I could be blind to those ways how it actually transformed into something that we don't. It's not in my research scope. So something important could well be happening there that I don't see.
But in your research, you have been wondering whether democracy's crisis can be solved with crowdsourcing and with crowd technologies.
Yeah.
What is your answer to that big problem?
What's that again? What's
your take on that issue?
Well, as I said, I kind of moved from a fairly technologically driven orientation towards a more kind of hybrid model where technology is one thing, but if as individuals we're not ready to transform, the technology is not going to do it for us.
I agree.
So, what does this mean in practice? The corporeal power-making channels are that we perhaps join a party and a political party, and then we try to influence the platform. Perhaps we become some kind of activists in a political movement, and then 15 years from now, maybe a small change will occur. but that's, the contribution of my research in the Civic Initiative Act and the Equal Marriage Law was that people don't operate necessarily on that kind of level nowadays. They want to do things and achieve things in a different pace. And the parliamentary cycle and going into the institutional structures of democracy is just not what they want to do right now. It's not their way of operating, and that's why we need the kind of channels that the Civic Initiative Act is. But I do not believe that even if we had 1 million of those, it would change things completely to the way that we perhaps imagine.
Okay.
Just because they are there, it does need the human and the collective action elements that is, it's not part of the design of most of these tools. What was good about the action that we saw in the equal marriage law was that the activists actually, they built this kind of a space for sharing things, for creating things together, also with the government. And I think that's actually one of the issues that needs to be mentioned here, that the government, the Ministry of Justice, was pretty open for the collaboration with the developers,
Okay.
the civic developers who wanted to make their own law drafting and petitioning platform.
Okay.
And they invited, the Ministry of Justice invited this group of guys, as the ministry officials said. There might have been gals as well, but most of them were probably like 30-something
Okay.
guys who said that we need a transformation in our democracy.
Uh-huh.
And the Ministry of Justice said, okay, let's have a look at what kind of a service we should have. These were, skillful developers,
Yes.
and who had ideas of how that their skills could advance democracy. And they started to specify what the service should be with the civil society in this way. And that is actually what we should see more, not so much or only the technological tool or the service or gadget that comes out of it, but meeting together over the institutional boundaries and then see what we can do. And that was one of the outcomes of my research, that perhaps there is a new kind of citizenship, which I call the mediating citizenship,
Yes.
which is not only the old kind of citizen who votes and reads the newspaper and then contributes every 4 years to the political process.
Okay.
And he's not, that's called a dutiful citizen, not in my typology. I didn't develop it, but it's out there in research.
Okay.
And then there's the other kind of established typology of the actualizing citizen who is ready to move on the grassroots and tries to push on towards change. I argue that there is something in between. There is the mediating citizens whose skills are sometimes on par and excel those of the government, and these people are willing to meet face to face, on par, eye to eye with the government, and say, let's do something together.
Yes.
And that is something that we should tap into if you look at this from the government's perspective, that bringing in these people who have skills and have ideas and passion on civic issues, we should provide them channels to create new channels, basically. the Civic Initiative Act.
Okay.
So that's something I would, as a result of that particular article, recommend for both the civil society and the government to have a look at. How can we leave our own positions and come to a shared space and create something new?
Okay. And my last question. How do you see representative democracy in the long term? Let's say, where do you think it's heading as we integrate more and more and more internet-based technologies in our life?
That's a great question. I would lie if I said I had any kind of a long-term vision that's clear enough to say out loud here. I do think that parliamentary representative democracy is a great system. I just in many ways it's a baby that we shouldn't throw away.
Okay.
Even if we constantly develop new complementary channels for power making.
Okay.
So I think we're probably going towards a kind of a multi-level approach where we have the parliamentary channel, which is kind of the, if you want to put it that way, it's kind of somewhere up here.
Okay.
Then there are mid-level channels like crowdsourcing service, where and other kind of digital tools, probably manual tools and spaces as well,
Okay.
where the mediating citizen can operate between the levels.
Okay.
And then there's the grassroots, the kind of the civil society that works in neighborhood communities and NGOs and all that. And I think there's a continuous flux between these levels, so individuals can operate on all levels and move flexibly, or just stay on one if they prefer. And basically, it's probably a power sharing system in the long run.
Okay, I agree completely. And thank you very much, Taneli.
Thank you. I hope you got
Heikka.
something out of it.
A lot.
Pleasure to talk with you.
No, pleasure to have your answers. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.